Technology Officer and Chairman of Zylab. So I'll turn it over now to Johan.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me share my screen. Very happy to be here. So should be able to see my screen in a second. There you go.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm from Zylab, where I manage the data science team, and I kind of also make the decisions which technology to use, which algorithms, which methods from AI, data science, and how to apply them in a responsible way to the field of e-discovery in particular. In addition, I'm a full professor at Maastricht University, and my chair is named Text Mining at the Artificial Intelligence group. And today I'm going to present why and how we're using all kind of different automation and support for today's legal fact-finding missions. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with e-discovery. Let me see, is it going to the next slide? Yeah, there we go. But is it changing? Is there a little delay?
Yeah, it should have.
There we go. Okay. I'll give you a very brief introduction why what the business problem is that we're trying to solve. Regulatory pressure is mounting. We all know that there's an increased complexity and there's all kind of contradiction legislation. Regulatory pressure leads to serial litigation, and it's this is only getting worse. There's an increased need for transparency, not only for corporates by shareholders or activists, but also from the public, especially in the field of public records requests. We see a lot of pressure on local governments, and both corporations and governments really have to deal with these type of issues. What we do is, with everything we do, we leave a digital trail. We leave emails, of course, file shares, content management systems, social media, mobile devices, contracts, patents, and everybody, with this legal trail, there's also others that know that. Regulators know it, upset clients, shareholders, citizens, or employees know it. And if they have an issue, they will actually come after you. And that's typically starts by doing an information request. It could be an audit or an internal investigation. It could also be related to litigation, arbitration. It could be a dispute about patents, contracts, HR disputes, but also in the field of merger and acquisitions, refinancing, restructuring. There's huge data rooms. They used to be just 1,000 documents these days, especially in real estate. We see data rooms of millions of pages. And then there's the Freedom of Information Act and the Public Records Acts, which put a lot of pressure on local governments. These type of information requests, we call them e-discoveries. E-discovery is a very formal process. You have to identify relevant information, you have to collect it, you have to filter out irrelevant information, then find what's relevant, protect privacy, confidential and privileged data, and then hand over, or what we call produce in legal context, to the party who's requesting the data. This is a problem for, like I said, for corporates who are the clients we sell this solution to, but also to governments and also to law firms. Okay, now the problem with e-discovery is that it comes in waves. E-discoveries are always related to an incident. They relate also to the biggest data sets in legal tech. If you're talking about big data, e-discovery is the big data. You need to act fast. There's no time for competitive procurement. And if you are not prepared, it will cost you. I don't know if anybody of you have ever been the subject of an e-discovery, but you probably know there's a lot of hidden costs related to it. There's data everywhere. You have to collect everything. There could be legacy systems that are very hard to access. IT could be unprepared. Legal's probably overworked. There's business disruptions. Your reputation may be at line. And if you don't do it right, there's deadline sanction penalties and a lot of other unexpected legal fees. So that's a problem. Related to this problem is that organizations that have to deal with these type of information requests, what they're looking for is price transparency, budget predictability, cost savings, And that's only possible if you use more automation. You need to make it an automatic process with less disruption, faster throughput, smarter workflow. And at the end of the day, our clients would like to collaborate very efficiently, as efficient not only in-house between IT and legal and the business, but also between legal and the external counsel. They would like to measure the productivity of their legal advisors. They would like to keep track of progress, and by having all parties collaborate, they hope to achieve the goals they have. Now, this is kind of the business problem that we're solving, but there's something that we have to take into context, and that is, of course, legal defensibility, which is a very interesting problem in relation to artificial intelligence. Now, as you probably all know, already in 85, 86, Blair and Marin showed that the recall estimation of manual reviewers in e-discovery was highly, or in those days, discovery was highly exaggerated. There's a lot of other myths in e-discovery that have been invalidated by scientific research. One of them is that computer algorithms actually provide much better review quality than human reviewers these days. Machine learning algorithms provide better review than Boolean search. Machine learning, when you start with random selections, is actually better than when you start with, is not better than when you start with handpicked training documents. And machine learning is also very robust against review errors, contrary to other things now. This is the context we have to work with. And what I would like to do now is I would like to show you a couple of the screenshots of our solution, and then also explain you where we use different fields from AI. So our product is called Xylab One eDiscovery. It's a highly scalable do-it-yourself SaaS solution. So we allow our clients to upload relevant data themselves into a cloud environment, which most of the time is Azure, very secure. We can very quickly scale it up. We can run it with 4 cores, but if we need to run it with 1,000 cores, we can immediately hit them. The fact that our clients can do it themselves is very tempting or very interesting, because they don't need to wait for any third party. They don't need to give their data to a service provider. They can upload it, and an hour later they can start reviewing and investigating their data, or what they also call it early case assessment. I'll get back to that later. Once the data is uploaded, we do a lot of automatic enrichments. There's still a lot of paper in the legal business, and also a lot of PDFs and non-OCR PDFs. So we do a lot of the dirty work, so to say. We OCR in 4 directions in 300 different languages. We do machine translation. We can also implement phonetic audio search, and we have our own search engine, which is actually the field we've been active in for a long time, which is highly optimized for legal applications and focused on providing high recall and providing incomplete search capabilities. After this, and then this is just a couple of minutes, you can already start looking at the data. The data is fully organized. We use these facets. Users can define their own facets. Facets can be related to custodians, language, document types, but also to more abstract categories like sentiments, emotions, or potential relevant documents related, for instance, if it's an antitrust case. We're actually looking for patterns and documents that indicate that there's certain antitrust behavior. We have a whole library of different types of investigation goals. We use analytics. The idea of providing analytics is to help the users to do proper decision support. So after the data is analyzed, we visualize it, and we help the user to take the right decisions. I'll tell you a little bit more about it. What's very important in e-discovery is that after you have an immediate insight, you can actually start making some strategic decisions based on facts. And this is what's called early case assessment in the field of e-discovery. And this is very relevant if you want to estimate or indicate whether what's actually happening and how many resources you need to align. But also, for that, you also need an overview of all data. And And yeah, we have this whole list of different analytics. I can probably talk here for hours, but I only have 20 minutes, so I'll just show you some of the more interesting parts. But the analytics can be classified in structural ones, where we look at the structure of the data, which can be anything from deduping to language identification to email thread detection. To more conceptual ones, where we look at the meaning, the semantics of the data. We look at content clustering, topic modeling, sentiment and emotion mining. And then we also can use machine learning techniques to actually teach the computer what we're looking for. Now, these analyses are mainly focused around the who, where, when, why, what, how, and how much. And so we've taken this a step further in our platform. And once we have made these type of analysis, including all kind of text mining analysis, we can provide certain visuals that the users can use as an alternative to a traditional search result list. So this is a clustering method we used with topic modeling, where it kind of indicates what happened. This is on the Enron data set, 80 gigabytes of email, and users can, it's very interactive, they can actually click on it, and then they can go to document lists, and they can also start machine learning from several of these different topics. We also do community detection, providing insight into who, and then we can do geo-mapping and timeline. Now, all of this is pretty straightforward, but where we've been very successful is by combining those W questions. So this is an example of what happened when, where we're making a dynamic overview of the topic model you saw before, but then we represent it in time. And you can actually see that this is the news from Reuters in 2014. And you can immediately, from the visualization, see certain anomalies. Like the invasion in Ukraine, or there at the right bottom, Ukraine, there was actually MH17, which was shut down. You also see some other rivers, which are some indicators of news that went on for most of the year. I'll get back to this later. This is an interesting one. This is who did what, why. What we did here is we analyzed 200,000 song lyrics. And we actually did some emotion mining on them. What we see is that emotions are very interesting in the field of e-discovery, because when something goes wrong in a fraud or in some kind of case, or then people start swearing, they start using, they forget that they are on email or in social media, and you can actually measure an increased level of emotion and sentiment in those type of correspondences. So by going after those emails, or correspondences, we actually can find out much faster what went on. If you look here at the right, the song lyrics, Trust, Anticipation, Joy, that's where Elvis and the Beatles and David Bowie are. At the left, you can actually see the rappers, so we're Anger. You can see Eminem and 50 Cent. So it really works, and it also works very good on email communication. Now, this is all still kind of static, and this is still decision support. Where we're doing our research now is that we want to take it to a next step, where we would like to take these type of analysis and then do some automatic anomaly detection, because there's a certain type of natural behavior in data, like there's in language, there's natural behavior that, like certain words occur very frequent, and very few words occur very frequent, and very many words occur very rare. You see the same kind of exponential power law distribution also in other types of analysis. And what we're currently trying to research is how we can use anomaly detection and incident detection methods to indicate where in these very large graphs we can actually interest the user, because one of the problems that we see these days is that these graphs are becoming so large as the data collection grows that it's impossible for users to take educated decisions about them. So we're trying to teach the computer how to find anomalies in these type of setups, and then prioritize and speed up the research. Okay, now this is all used to do by corporations to do a light review, to remove as many documents as possible, because what we see in practice is that the more data you give to your external counsel, the higher your legal bill will be. And recently we found a new application of Moore's Law where we found that legal bills double also every 18 months. So what we see that corporations and governments are trying to do is they try to reduce the data set as much as they can without getting into trouble. So by removing personal documents, non-relevant documents, tagging potentially privileged and prioritizing batches for reviewers and investigators, they can actually save a lot of money. Now, what we do is that the next step is once these data sets have been pruned or culled, as we call it in the e-discovery, we're using machine learning these days to review documents. So instead of searching with Boolean queries, we take a couple of documents that are relevant, we teach them to the computer, and then the computer gives us the best documents back. Users review them. It's a process that lawyers really understand. Lawyers are very good in reading very fast, very quickly. They're much better in reading than in writing Boolean queries with complex search languages. What you see here is the graph of a system where we take batches of fixed size, show them to the users review them. In the beginning you see that the precision is like 100%. So the system returns only relevant documents. At a certain moment there are not enough relevant documents anymore in the system, and that's when the system will also start returning documents it has a little doubt about, until there are no relevant documents anymore, and then you are more or less certain that you found all of the documents that you're looking for. Now what we see with this search methodology is that we find 2 to 3 times more relevant documents on every experiment, every occasion we do than when users do extensive manual reviews. We do it in a fraction of the time. And the most important is that at the end of this process, we can provide an exact estimate of the recall. So we can tell, we can very strongly say that we have like 80 or 90% recall. It's an iterative process, it's an adaptive process, and yeah, we've been able to even teach this to judges and other people that are not very computer educated. Now, what's the next? California privacy laws, the new ones. I don't know, did they pass? turn day. See now, we can find to what are where you are when you search, you find things that you respond to able to find actually use the to work with people and positions that document work and names when they're used the place so we can produce the whole process. Do millions of people.
Jason, there's from
European Union curious what years 200 years or business.
We actually sell our software in network. That is it's we use the in the US. Get them. Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
You know this on people to maybe look at the person next to you. Down to the same meeting and figure out what is yeah. In cross country, off roll innovation and share and responsive. It's really about how can we make things, and we use in-house consultants. They've got other areas, and factor facilitator, and we look at and the thought is how do they help when we one that I'll talk about
No, it's off. Okay. Are we all good now?
You
You
guys
should be.
clear?
Did you take on?
Should we test?
Did you mute the videos? Yeah.
Do you want to ask the
I
crowd?
did.
Yeah.
So we're
Somebody give a
live.
virtual thumbs up.
So we just gotta,
I'm asking.
all right, so we're back on the air. I'm gonna ask people outside if we, okay.
Terrific. All right, Dee.
All right, thank
Floor
you,
is yours.
Dee.
Oh, that's okay. Is everyone able to hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So the process that the team utilized is they obviously gathered data, built an understanding, and then they designed for multiple users. They sort of understood who is involved and what is needed for them to sort of reach the final result. I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is sort of what they started an interview and field research through lots of different user groups. They created what is familiar to most tech folks and not familiar to most of our government staff, which is the user journey, sort of documenting the process, the processes, and the people. And they realized in some cases, anomalies, it could take up to 10 years for some of these pieces to go from end to end because of various roadblocks, and that's not acceptable. And they had to think about all these different individuals who needed to access this system. And not as a surprise, but most of them don't have a computer but have a smartphone. So thinking through not just digitizing sort of the current application, but like what is really what information do we really need from them? What resources do they have to give it to us, and how do we design around that? And they pulled in some research around what does that sort of, even at the lowest denominator, smartphone user have, and what are they able to utilize? And the outcomes for them were they paved the way for a new affordable housing portal that was simple and easy to use for residents, and the back end was sufficient for our MoCD team to actually move people through the process and understand where things were falling off so that we could start designing for troubleshooting instead of just designing for even just an entry point process. And this is the final result. It's called Dahlia, and it's one of our most successful Civic Bridge projects. And I'll share a little bit about where it is now. So this was created in 2015. This is sort of the Civic Bridge project you can see in the beginning. Then we had sort of another set of hands-on activities where we helped them secure vendors. They actually put out the RFP, they did the build. And now they did their beta launch, they did their training, and they launched it. And now we're working on dashboards and metrics and a full comprehensive tool that's changed the way that we offer services in the city and has become an example for multiple departments. And that is the type of work that our team is really proud of, is not, what can our team afford to, but how can we really help connect the dots for this type of impact to occur. And I'll open it up now for some questions.
So Micah.
So I understand, I may have missed it, but I understand it correctly. So the team here kind of did the analysis of the problem and generated more or less some ideas and a spec for something that would solve that problem. Then you did an RFP and somebody built it. So there was a separation between the implementers and the designers.
Yes.
And in tech, that sometimes obviously worked because this is successful, but
Right.
sometimes that's not that separation is not so good. So is that the model you see is going forward? Was there any problem with that? Shouldn't the implementation team have been involved in the design? I'm just kind of curious how you respond to that.
Those were all really great questions. I wouldn't say that's always the case. That was the case in this instance.
I see.
In some cases, it is sort of the same person end to end. It's sort of how do we inject this approach into designing services? So now departments may not need a Civic Bridge team, but they will design a user journey. And they will do some of this pre-speccing work before they work with a vendor or put out an RFP to think about, okay, how do we really design this process better? Some of our Civic Bridge teams focus on other sorts of user design issues that are not related to like creating a portal. Sometimes it's a strategy, sometimes it's a set of recommendations on how to operate strategically as a department. So yes, I can see where the handoff could create some issues. In this instance, it was like one of our first cases for just trying out what that would look like.
Makes a bit of sense, right? Yeah.
So I don't know if we met in City Hall, but I met with Shannon Spenhockey.
Yeah.
And on behalf of Jay.
She was our predecessor, so
Correct.
yeah.
And so I think that you are much more mature in dealing with some of this stuff. So at the time, we wanted to use CRA money, Community Reinvestment Act money that the banks every year must fund into certain needy neighborhoods.
Right.
And to have those neighborhoods sort of direct those funds. So after today, I'd love to come back with you and review how that could work.
Yeah.
Because you've really matured the process by which you're interacting with the innovators.
Well,
That's
thank
great.
you. Thank you. I think we've had a team, an iteration of teams that have really been strategic. Jay obviously leading the charge.
Yep.
For how do we work smart as a team, right? Which is not serving as a design consultant at one-off instances through our 30 plus department and 30,000 plus, staff, including the airport and, others. And so the partnership model that we've really adopted, and I think at this point is matured enough, like STIR, for example, which is spun off to become its own instance, and Civic Bridge, which other cities are now starting to look at modeling and replicating, I think speaks for sort of that ingenuity of doing more with less. Yeah.
I have a quick follow-up. Oh, sorry to. Have you ever run into regulatory or legislative roadblocks where someone comes up with some great idea for here's the great way to do it, but then in the legislation it's kind of hard-coded, you can't do it that way? And how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, so some of our projects are sort of have not been actualized because they're, in Mo CD is an example, right? There's other projects that they're working on right now, a Civic Bridge project, which is how to bring Prop F to life in San Francisco, which is legal counsel for folks who may face evictions, and that's very policy heavy. So the team that's working on that isn't going to see an outcome like this, which is a technical deliverable on the instantly. It's sort of, what are we creating as the seed for step one? How do we interject a new approach or a fresher approach to sort of working through anything that's policy related? And it's all about stepping stones with that. And it's sort of consistent tracking from our team to go back and keep those departments trekking along when there's policy issues, there's administration issues, there's leadership issues, there's always change, and that's inevitable. And those do create roadblocks, but what we hope to do is build these frameworks that any director, any administration can see sort of the results that have been created, the research that's been created, the recommendations, and still find ways to move them forward. So within the recommendations, there's always sort of the greater set of next steps, and then there's sort of like the low-hanging fruit and sort of building traction to get to some of those larger changes.
Got it. I think we should move on to Jay's presentation. Maybe at the end we can have additional questions.
If you can hang around after.
There's time. That would be great.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dee. Let's move on to Jay, and I apologize. I'm down with a cold right now, so I apologize for any sniffles or coughing that's going on. But Susan, do we have Jay set up on the computer?
We do. Jay, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah. If you want to accept start video, we can also get your video feed, but not required.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to do that. I think I may have done something really strange because you invited me to
you logged
my
out.
video, and
There you are.
Wait.
okay.
Yeah.
There.
Thank you.
Yeah, we got you. Perfect. Well, welcome. Jay Ness is the co-executive director of City Innovate, and in the interest of time, I'll turn it over to him. Thank you, Jay, for coming.
Yeah, and thank you so much for inviting me to share the work that we're doing, and great to see Dee Prasad sharing the work that the Mayor's Office of Civic Innovation is doing as well. As some of you sort of inferred from the conversation, my previous role was the Chief Innovation Officer for the Mayor of San Francisco for a number of years, and I've been in public service for a number of years. So our organization, we're a nonprofit here in San Francisco. We work with governments all across the US and Canada to help them address the challenges that they're facing. And we do that by bringing in new capacity, entrepreneurial capacity specifically, through the Startup in Residence program to introduce emerging technologies, et cetera. And if you think about emerging technologies and how they're impacting cities today, the model is really one of cities being reactive, of governments being reactive. And we really want to change that conversation so that that it's more collaborative, that technology companies and cities are sitting down together to really understand what are the values, what are those items in the public interest that really need to be protected. And that's not something entrepreneurs are thinking about, nor should they be. So we really need to have that bridge, that dialogue that's happening between cities and technology firms. Just to give a little bit of history on the Startup in Residence program, it started in the Mayor's Office in San Francisco in 2014, and it's grown to now over 30 governments across the US. It's now fully operated by City Innovate as a nonprofit. And the way that the program works is that we work very closely with governments across the US, large cities like LA and Miami and San Francisco and San Jose, and smaller communities like Peoria, Illinois, Mobile, Alabama. And we do that intentionally because we believe that every community should have access to entrepreneurs, whether it's from their own community or from the global community of entrepreneurs, to help tackle the challenges that they're facing. So we work with them closely for a number of months to identify challenges and problems that they're facing. We then go through a streamlined procurement process to share those challenges with this global startup community. And this October 9th, we anticipate over 100 RFPs being released publicly. To our knowledge, that's the largest collection of RFPs being released at any one point in time. And they're startup-friendly RFPs, so they take less than an hour to go through. And there's a bunch of innovation there to accomplish that streamlined sort of a process. So we want to really reduce that friction and that issue that has historically been problematic for younger companies. Now, sorry for the background noise. And so once we issue those challenges, we're looking for the best startups really to participate in the program. Once they get matched in January, they work for 4 months to really build a solution. So it's a co-creation process where they deeply understand the problem. They work with their government partners, community partners to do that user research, to understand what those issues are. And hold on one second. Sorry, I'm at a WeWork location and can't manage the outside noise always that well. So my apologies for that. So we go through that 4-month process, and we really see this collaborative approach. And as I mentioned, it's not technology being foisted upon an organization, but it's really resetting the table where it's a collaborative effort to understand the needs, understand the interests of the public and those values to ensure that they're actually integrated into the product and the outcomes that they're trying to achieve. And at the end of the 4 months, the default position is that they're going to go into contract. And that commercial sustainability is really, really important because these startups are investing 4 months of their time. It's an opportunity cost. They're volunteering their time. And the expectation is that not only are they going to learn about the needs, but their hope is that they are able to get a customer as a reference and be able to scale their business and grow that business more broadly. And in fact, most of our startups end up getting a contract with a government partner. We're making that even more stringent and sort of the default position. So we're excited about the 100 RFPs coming out in October 9th. And we've seen some great academic startups, including some of you may know, Symbiom, that was very successful in participating in our last cohort. And for those of you who are not familiar with Symbiom, it was a stealth startup that came out of Stanford's law school. I think the CEO is a fellow at CodeX, and they did amazing work, working closely with the planning department in San Francisco to really understand how to solve their need, which was, hey, we have 2,000 pages of our planning code. It's in a PDF, really hard to understand. You need to be a lawyer or somebody specializing in this space. How do we make that more accessible? And their ambition is to make all law globally available to computers and machines, sort of an API. And you can imagine a number of use cases for that. If you're an autonomous vehicle, being able to query an API to understand what the traffic regulations are in the jurisdiction that you're in versus inferring that through computer vision. So we're really excited to see academic startups, and in fact, we're spending quite a bit of time with academics to let them know about this opportunity so they can participate and try to grow their business. And we've seen a number of startups grow very successfully from this program. Our startups have raised over $60 million. There's been 3 acquisitions, and so far there's only been 44 that have participated, but we anticipate over 50 or 75 startups participating in this cohort. Our hope is that we grow to 100 cities in the next couple of years, and we're on track for that. We grew from 9 cities to 31. We have a couple of states that are participating. We've got Canada, Edmonton, and potentially Montreal participating. So really excited about the growth, the opportunity, and taking a step back, this is a big market. It's over $1 trillion globally. Spend in government technology spend, and the government is at the intersection of so many interesting problems and so many important problems in society. So they are often a very important stakeholder and a key stakeholder in addressing those societal challenges. And we need more startup ingenuity working with government on these problems. I saw it firsthand in San Francisco. There's literally thousands of opportunities, I think, to make really significant impact. we are looking at the legal aspect of the work that we're doing as well. And so we're looking at how do we actually streamline these friction points. So we've addressed the sort of barrier of RFPs. How do we address some of the other barriers? For example, contracting. Every jurisdiction has different contracts that you have to enter into. And if you're a Microsoft, that's okay. You've got a big legal team, you can go through that process. But it takes 3 months to go through that redlining process. San Francisco, as an example, took 2 years to put together, maybe longer, 3 years to put it together, a SaaS agreement that's over 60 pages long. And if you're a startup, that's near impossible to parse through. So you're just going to accept all the risk potentially. So our vision is, how do we streamline that? How do we standardize that over time? We've been inspired by SAFE. I've done some data standardization work in San Francisco, establishing data standards globally. So we know it's possible, and it's an area of keen interest to us. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity to share the work that we're doing. And it's really a partnership with our government partners, including San Francisco and many other communities across the US and Canada. And Dee Prasad is actually the STIR program manager in San Francisco. So you've got an expert at the table on the program itself. So I'll pause there, see if there's any questions or comments about the program.
Yeah, sure. Bruce, go ahead.
Hey, Jay, it's great to see you. Bruce Cahan. I wonder, when I heard you say 100 RFPs, the thing that jumped to mind in terms of your own scaling is, have you explored partnering with 100 resilient cities and Rockefeller and seeing where Mike Berkowitz could percolate out of the Chief Resilience Officer CRO network that he has built globally, problems that you all could take on as innovation opportunities?
I would love to have that conversation with you offline. I think it's a great idea. We want to tap into existing networks. So Bruce, if you have connection with the team there, we'd love to sort of reinforce that idea.
Yeah, Mike and I served at the command center after 9/11. So, yep, we can make that
You're
happen.
very close. That's great. We'd love your perspective on that conversation.
Sure.
Fantastic. Other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, fascinating. I would like to phrase this maybe perhaps to both of you. And the interesting opportunity here with the Dahlia project, as I see it, and a sort of, this is a smart Google-centric with ex-President John Hennessy as chair of Alphabet sort of question is, how could one create these sort of entrepreneurial opportunities over 4 months for contracts for students with sort of indexing perhaps real estate, houses in a Google Street View perspective, so that that becomes the basis for developing law, for also perhaps adding in the Google ecosystem voice for the myriad of documents that could be reduced to, the 300 languages in Wikipedia and interaction with natural language processing. Broad question. So how much are you focusing on the Google ecosystem in developing your various projects ahead, strategizing with the city, and in these entrepreneurial opportunities for 4-month contracts for potentially students, it sounds like partly as entrepreneurs?
Yeah, Google's actually a partner of the Startup in Residence program, and I've worked with Google quite a bit in different interactions. I think there's different ways that we can work with Google, whether it's their infrastructure, whether it's their talent, whether it's the policies that they've been able to establish, the data standards. We see Google as a global platform, and whether it's on any of those items I mentioned, the ones you mentioned, there's a big opportunity and something we want to educate the cities on. So when you have a special event, go work with ways to let them know that you have this special event. If you're looking at coming together to establish data standards, Google can be a great partner, as they were with Portland and TriMet on GTFS. So we try to educate our government partners on the resources that the corporates can bring, and not just on a consumer level, but as a thought partner, as a strategic partner. So absolutely, I think that's fantastic. And I think it's a mindset shift. And that's something that I think Dee and Moki and what we really, our mark has been, let's be that bridge with the broader ecosystem, because government is often so insular. And we have arguably the best talent in the world in the Bay Area, and yet we have so many challenges that those voices and that talent are not participating in. And Civic Bridge, I think, is sort of the essence of that, but STIR represents that same ethos as well. So absolutely, I think there's so many different opportunities.
Mike, yeah.
Yeah. Hi Jay. The question I have is two very interesting programs, Civic Bridge, and of course you got a foot in each camp.
I do.
So I'm just kind of curious though that you have projects or a problem that needs to be solved, and it could be Civic Bridge is more appropriate for it, or it could be that STIR is more appropriate. How do you decide? Do you do both? Do you choose one? How is that decision made? How are you dealing with that?
Well, I can take that, and Jay, you can add in. So within San Francisco, we've sort of created typologies for our when we do our sourcing of ideas. And it starts with a conversation with the department of like, what's a priority? And then we as a team sort of come back to them with like, here's the program that we think would be an appropriate fit. For Civic Bridge, it's about sort of those areas that I talked about: user design, strategy, communication, sort of like your internal operations. Whereas STIR is, they need a technology-based solution. And so traditionally, they would either buy something off the shelf, an enterprise-based solution, something that's currently existing, and then figure out how to customize it or work with it the way it is. Or they would go to their internal IT team and say, can you build this? And then we'll figure out how to maintain it at some point. And STIR is sort of that middle road, which is there's existing solutions that may not be in the GovTech space. Let's think about sort of creating your problem a little more open-ended and seeing how existing technology companies or startups could approach this. But the end result would be a technology-based solution, whereas with Civic Bridge, that's not always the case, and actually even less the case. Like sort of the Dahlia project was around service design, but now we have a chief digital services officer. So we've sort of built in some of that internal capacity who still works with our Civic Bridge projects, but she now sort of has our internal framework of like how we approach service design.
Yeah, I would have expected the Dahlia thing might have been something that would have come out of STIR, which is why what kind of suggesting the question. Also, some new technologies might disrupt the way things are done.
It sounds like you're doing a lot of government culture transformation.
Exactly, right. So,
which is your point, that you need a middle person, an intermediary to carry that water a little bit.
Sort of been our role. And
one other thing I want to add is that, when you think about communities and the talent that communities have broadly, academic talent, there's, I think, a huge opportunity there to sort of match city problems and academic talent. And that's an area that we're actively looking into. We were invited by the NSF to submit an eager grant on taking the STIR model and applying it to research. And so you could think of it as researchers in residence. How do you actually get researchers to tackle city challenges in a way that is structured, that has a sustainable model and has a procurement backing, so that your funding sources are not just NSF, NIH, et cetera, but you also have cities which often have large budgets. I mean, San Francisco's budget, as many of you know, is over $10 billion. How do you take a portion of that? And I would argue probably today, it's less than 1% that's going to academia. How do you get access to some of the best talent in the world to tackle public health issues, safety, et cetera, issues? Right now it's ad hoc, it's opportunistic, it's who you know, and the mechanisms to engage are difficult. Is it sponsored research? Is it voluntary? All of those pathways are, I think, inadequate. We need to create a new pathway, maybe a community-sponsored research program. But today, it's not working. So we're eager to explore a new model for that type of engagement that scales across the US.
I think it'd be great. So one of the things, I wasn't sure whether you were online at the time, I asked Dee earlier that she had pointed out that Civic Bridge had most of the partners there in that case were companies, Bloomberg and others. And I asked why were there no universities there? Because here on campus we have this body of people wanting to approach problems and with ideas that might be appropriate for them. We're not startups yet, we're not existing companies, but certainly there's talent there. And for example, here within CodeX, we've been talking about a clinic, a legal tech clinic, where people could try applying new legal tech ideas to existing social problems and legal problems. And it might be very good to have some kind of reach from the other side of from you guys who say, here we have some problems that you guys could work on, and maybe we can match them in some way. Maybe funding would come through that or not, but even if it's an involuntary thing, there's an opportunity here. So I like the idea of sort of expanding, not just startups, but maybe also looking at researcher and residents. I think you said was an interesting concept.
Absolutely, and I think the question is, how do you structure in a way that is sustainable, that you get that commitment? Because as we know, students have other obligations, faculty have obligations. How do you balance all of those obligations and get that level of commitment? You know, Google's doing something great. They're saying, hey, that 20%, you can use your work hours to do this. It's a big gift or donation, but you know, as faculty or as researchers, you don't have that necessarily. So we need to think of that mechanism because it's important, and that's why we've been thinking of how do you get government to actually put money on the table to actually create sustainability. But anyways, we can maybe talk offline.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I'd like to do that. Thanks.
Fantastic.
Great to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jay. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, well, that wraps up this meeting.
Yeah, usually this is the point in the meeting where Roland turns to me and says, what's coming up? And so basically next week, I think we're on hiatus. We'll reconvene the following Thursday, October 11th. And I encourage people to watch their email because we're doing a number of events next month. So they're available remotely and in person. So hope to see everybody either way.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Hey, Susan, explanation, we can go offline.
Hang on.